Imagine you're having dinner at a restaurant in Los Angeles. Window table, dim lighting, a plate that costs more than most people in Sinaloa earn in a week. And suddenly, at the table next to yours, a woman in her mid-30s sits down with her twin daughters. She orders sparkling water, takes a selfie, posts a story to Instagram. She looks like just another Southern California influencer. But this woman was once married to the most wanted criminal on the planet, spent 2.5 years in federal prison, and right now has 500,000 followers who treat her like a celebrity. That woman is Emma Coronel, and she's not alone. Because behind every major kingpin in organized crime, there is a woman whose life became a maze of luxury, terror, and survival. Today, I'm going to tell you what became of 7 of them, where they are now, how they live, and above all, how they went from being the queens of criminal empires to something no one saw coming. Stay until the end, because the last woman on this list is the most invisible of all, and her story will leave you speechless. Emma Coronel, the influencer who can't see her own husband. Let's start with the one everyone knows. Emma Coronel Aispuro was 17 years old when she met Joaquin Guzman Loera at a party in the mountains of Durango. She was competing as a candidate in a local beauty pageant. Someone approached her and said that an important man wanted to dance with her. A man walked up and said simply, "My name is Joaquin." That's straightforward. That's surreal. Shortly after winning the pageant and turning 18, they married in a symbolic ceremony. There wasn't even an official civil record. But that marriage made her La Señora of the Sinaloa Cartel. For years, Emma lived between mansions, private planes, and a husband who appeared and disappeared like a ghost. She gave birth to twin girls at a California hospital in 2011. She attended Guzman's trial in New York in 2019, sitting in the gallery in designer dresses, while witnesses described operations involving tons of illegal merchandise and tunnels beneath the border. Right there in that courtroom, she listened to the testimony of Lucero Sanchez, the former congresswoman who had been her husband's mistress. Emma didn't flinch. On the outside, on the inside, as she admitted years later in a documentary, it was the betrayal that hurt her the most, not because of the other women. She had always known they existed, but because this one was from the government. But here's what almost no one knows. In February 2021, federal agents arrested her at Dulles Airport in Virginia. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy to traffic illegal substances, money laundering, and operating with criminal organizations. The sentence was 3 years. She paid a fine of $1.5 million, and she was released in September 2023. Since then, her life looks nothing like before. She lives in California with her twin daughters, now 14 years old, who, according to her, want to be doctors. She didn't register them under their father's last name. She wanted to give them a clean future. Emma works as a model and influencer. She walked the runway at Milan Fashion Week for designer April Black Diamond. She launched a fitness guide called Cuerpo que Brilla. She starred in the music video for a song written about her, performed by her own attorney, Mariel Colon. And in late 2025, she released a documentary on Oxygen titled Married to El Chapo, where for the first time she spoke openly about her life, her marriage, and her regrets. But there is one condition that changes everything. Emma cannot see Guzman, cannot visit him, cannot write to him, cannot call him. It's part of her sentence. He is serving life in prison at the maximum security facility in Florence, Colorado, and she is prohibited from any contact with him whatsoever. Her attorney says Emma still loves him, but she will never see him as a free man again. In early 2026, Emma requested that her supervised release, currently set to expire in September 2027, be ended early. Her argument is that the restrictions have cost her work opportunities, as travel permits are sometimes denied or granted too late. The Department of Justice does not oppose the request, but the probation office does. In the meantime, Emma keeps posting Instagram stories, filming vlogs, and dropping hints that she wants to start a YouTube channel. The woman who sat in the gallery during the most high-profile trial of the century wearing designer dresses, who listened to accounts of underground tunnels and planes loaded with illegal merchandise without so much as blinking, is now filming vlogs in California and asking her followers whether she should start a YouTube channel. And one detail that says it all. Emma recently posted the song Mujer Enamorada by El Commander on her social media. The lyrics are about the wife of a powerful kingpin. No names are mentioned. None are needed. Emma is still in love with a man she cannot see, cannot call, and cannot write to. And while he spends his days in a 6x10 cell at the most secure prison in the United States, she promotes shapewear and workout guides on Instagram. From wife of the world's most powerful criminal to content creator in California. The contrast is so stark it feels like fiction, but it's real. Victoria Eugenia Henao, the widow who has spent 30 years running from a ghost. If Emma Coronel's story is the most public, Victoria Eugenia Henao's is the most tragic. Because Victoria didn't choose this life, it was imposed on her when she was still a child. She was 12 years old when Pablo Escobar appeared in her neighborhood in Envigado, Antioquia, riding a motorcycle. He was 23. The age gap was enormous, but in 1970s Colombia, no one protected her. At 15, they married in a church ceremony. At 16, she had her first child, Juan Pablo. By 25, she was the wife of the man who controlled 80% of the white substance entering the United States. Pablo gave her the nickname Tata, and from that moment on, he owned her fate. She lived in mansions with private zoos, private planes, and an incalculable fortune. But she also lived with bombings, hit lists, and a husband who, as she revealed decades later to therapists, was a psychopath who controlled her through emotional manipulation. For 44 years, she kept a secret she only shared with her adult son. Pablo had harmed her in ways she couldn't even name until her psychologists helped her process the trauma. When Escobar was taken out in December 1993 on a rooftop in Medellin, Victoria had two options: die or disappear. Pablo's enemies, the Cali Cartel, the Pepes, all wanted to wipe the Escobar name off the face of the earth. That included her and her children. Within 2 days of the funeral, there were already hitmen waiting to take them out. For an entire year, Victoria begged forgiveness from her husband's adversaries. Some demanded that her son Sebastian be eliminated as a condition for peace. She responded that she would rather they take the lives of all three of them before she would ever hand over her son. In the end, she was given one condition: walk away from the world of illegal substances forever. Victoria fled with her children through Africa and Brazil, eventually reaching Argentina in 1994, where the government of Carlos Menem reportedly offered her protection. She changed her name to Maria Isabel Santos Caballero. Her son became Sebastián Marroquín. They tried to start over. They lived first in a gated community near Luján, then in an apartment in the Buenos Aires neighborhood of Núñez, where counterterrorism police eventually tracked them down. But the past never let go. In Argentina, she faced money laundering charges. Authorities found properties purchased with suspicious funds, accounts in Uruguay, and a network of shell companies. The case dragged on for over 20 years through endless legal back and forth. In 2020, a judge sent her to trial alongside her son and former soccer player Mauricio Chicho Serna, accused of laundering millions through real estate dealings and the operation of the emblematic Café de los Angelitos in Buenos Aires. However, in March 2026, another federal judge dismissed all charges against the defendants, even nullifying the testimony of the case's key cooperating witness. Prosecutors pushed back sharply, calling the ruling biased and partial, and demanded the case be sent back to trial. While Argentine justice continues to grind on, Victoria gives talks in various countries, sharing her story with audiences that receive her with a mixture of fascination and empathy. In 2026, an Argentine content creator traveled to Mendoza to interview her and published a video that went viral. In it, she said she trusted the version of the widow she met in person far more than the one portrayed in television series. Victoria published a devastating book, My Life and My Prison with Pablo Escobar, in which she recounts the abuse, the fear, and the absolute isolation in which she raised her children. She also starred in a DirecTV documentary, and by her own account, she lives with very little. Escobar's fortune, which once landed him on the Forbes list 7 years in a row, was devoured by his enemies, the Colombian government and time. Her son Sebastian, now in his mid-40s, has publicly stated that he confronted his father about the violence 20 times while he was alive, and that it was his mother who taught him to question the monster. Victoria's greatest concern today is her young grandchild, for whom she wants, in her own words, a light and peaceful life. 3 decades after Escobar's death, his widow is still paying a debt she never signed up for. Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia, the boss who built an empire and walked free. And here is where the story takes a turn. Because Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia was not the decorative wife of a kingpin. She was the financial architect of one of the most violent cartels in Mexico. Born in El Naranjo, a rural community in Aguililla, Michoacán in 1963, Rosalinda grew up in a family of 18 siblings. Her parents grew avocados. But in the 70s, the men in the family began growing something else. A green substance first, then poppy-based crops. Her brothers emigrated to California in the 80s and integrated into the illegal substances trade under the structure of the Millennium Cartel. It was in that environment where she met Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, a young man who worked as a guard for her family's operations. After being deported from the United States, Nemesio married Rosalinda in 1996. That marriage wasn't just a personal union. It was a strategic alliance between 2 clans that would redraw the map of organized crime in Mexico. When the Millennium Cartel collapsed in the early 2010s, Nemesio, by then known as El Mencho, founded the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and the financial arm of that new organization was built by Rosalinda's brothers, known as Los Quines, with her serving as the principal administrator. Hence her alias, La Jefa, the boss. It wasn't an empty title. She oversaw more than 70 businesses, from restaurants and tequila producers to real estate ventures, all of which were sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department under the Kingpin Act. In May 2018, she was arrested in Zapopan, Jalisco. She posted bail of 1.5 million pesos and was released. In November 2021, she was rearrested for violating the terms of her release. In December 2023, a judge sentenced her to 5 years in prison for operations involving illicitly obtained funds. But in January 2025, after serving more than half of her sentence and demonstrating good behavior, a federal judge ordered her early release. And then came February 2026. And with it, the news that changed everything. El Mencho was taken out on February 22nd during an operation in the mountains of Tapalpa, Jalisco. Federal forces located him through intelligence work linked to one of his romantic partners. When ground forces arrived to arrest him, they were met with heavy fire from his security detail. El Mencho attempted to flee into a forested area where a second confrontation broke out. He was wounded, and he fell. The cartel's response was immediate: blockades, arson, and waves of violence across Jalisco and Colima. A supposed CJNG threat was even leaked, warning that government officials would be eliminated if the body was not returned. 23 inmates escaped from the Puerto Vallarta prison amid the chaos. Rosalinda, now a widow, remains free under supervision with pending legal proceedings, as the cartel she helped finance enters an inevitable internal reshuffling. Her son, El Menchito, is serving life plus 30 years in the United States after being convicted in March 2025. Her daughter, Jessica, was charged with money laundering through restaurants, bars, and a tequila production company in Jalisco. Her younger daughter, Laisha, was identified by military intelligence as the mastermind behind the kidnapping of 2 naval officers. On the night her mother was rearrested in 2018. The Oseguera Gonzalez dynasty is crumbling piece by piece. But La Jefa, the woman who united 2 clans and built the financial backbone of Mexico's most feared cartel, remains free and remains silent. Guadalupe Fernandez. Valencia, the patrona who betrayed the cartel to save her children. Now there's something you need to understand. Not all women in the cartel world were wives. Some were operators. And Guadalupe Fernandez Valencia was the highest-ranking woman in the history of the Sinaloa cartel. Born in Michoacán, Guadalupe started at the bottom. She worked in factories until she became pregnant and decided the illegal substances trade paid far better. She spent 10 years in a California prison for street-level distribution in the 90s. After being deported to Mexico, she tried to rebuild her life. She didn't manage it. She integrated into the Sinaloa cartel's structure through her brother Manuel, and in a short time became the lieutenant of Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, Alfredillo, one of Los Chapitos. Her job wasn't to shoot or intimidate. Her job was pure logistics. She coordinated weekly shipments of 30 kilos of white substance to Los Angeles. She moved tons of the green substance across the border. She supervised the use of planes, tunnels, and even submarines for smuggling operations according to Department of Justice charges. And she laundered the proceeds through currency exchange houses in Guadalajara, taking a 3% cut from every transaction. The DEA placed her on its list of the 8 priority targets within the Sinaloa cartel. She was the only woman on that list, and for years no one outside the criminal world knew who she was. Her name didn't appear in headlines. She had no social media, no public face. She was an operational ghost. In February 2016, 1 month after El Chapo's final capture, she was detained in Culiacán. In 2017, she was extradited to Chicago. There, in a federal courtroom, she made the decision that would save her life and define her reputation forever. She cooperated. The details of her cooperation are sealed, but prosecutors described it as substantial assistance. Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman acknowledged that Guadalupe had put her own life and the lives of her 5 children at risk by providing information. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison instead of life. She served approximately 3 years in actual custody after deducting time already served in Mexico and the United States. In 2024, she was released. But here's the problem. La Patrona cooperated with the U.S. government and handed over information on the very people she had worked alongside for decades. If she is deported to Mexico, the odds of her surviving are slim. Many of her former associates remain free, including Alfredillo, her direct supervisor. And the internal power struggles within the Sinaloa cartel make any informant an immediate target. Her current whereabouts are not publicly known, nor is the name she goes by now. Before her arrest, she had already spent 10 years in a California prison for street-level distribution. After that, another 8 years between Mexican and American facilities in her second round. Nearly 2 decades of her life behind bars. What is known is that she asked for forgiveness through tears at her sentencing, saying she could not find the words to express how sorry she was, and that the sealed file containing her disclosures may be one of the most valuable pieces of intelligence the DEA holds on the internal structure of Los Chapitos. The woman who was once the right hand of one of El Chapo's sons now lives somewhere without a name, hoping not to be found. Clara Elena Laborin, the beauty queen who took command of the cartel. And if you think Guadalupe was an exceptional case, wait until you hear Clara Elena Laborin Archuleta's story. Because this woman didn't just live off the cartel, she ran it. Born in Agua Prieta, Sonora in 1964, Clara Elena was crowned Miss Sonora in her youth. By all accounts, she was ambitious, someone who wanted to be known as a wealthy woman from Sonora who had made her mark. And she did. Through an entertainment promoter named Guillermo Francisco Ocaña, she organized high society events across the state, hired artists for private parties, and even attempted to launch a media company and a magazine called Jeans, which only produced 2 issues. She married Hector Beltran Leyva, known as LH, one of the brothers who formed the feared Beltran Leyva cartel, cousins of El Chapo Guzman. For years, Clara Elena enjoyed the spoils of that world. Parties with fashion designers, events in Acapulco, cocktail receptions with designer Armando Mafud. A social life that blurred the line between high society and organized crime so seamlessly that no one could tell where one ended and the other began. But in 2010, everything changed. An armed group abducted her in Hermosillo. They held her for 13 days. She was released bound hand and foot in front of the University of Sonora, with a message left beside her addressed to her husband. "We're going to teach you to respect families." The Sinaloa cartel claimed responsibility in retaliation for the killing of a rival kingpin's son. And then came the unthinkable. Hector Beltran Leyva was arrested in 2014 at a restaurant in San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato, and Clara Elena, La Señora, took the reins of the cartel. She signed cartel banners. She directed armed cells in Guerrero. Between 2014 and 2016, she turned Acapulco into a war zone, fighting for control of the plaza against the independent cartel of Acapulco with backing from the CJNG. She was listed as one of the 50 priority security targets in the state of Guerrero. A former beauty queen turned leader of one of Mexico's most violent criminal organizations. In September 2016, she was arrested in Hermosillo with 2 kilos of white substance and weapons. She was formally charged with crimes against public health. Back in 2009, the U.S. Treasury Department had already added her to its sanctions list as a suspected cartel money launderer. She owned properties in Sonora, the state of Mexico, and Guerrero, including a home in the exclusive La Herradura development in Huixquilucan. And in November 2018, from her cell at the Federal Women's Prison in Morelos, she received word that her husband had died of a heart attack at the Altiplano Maximum Security Prison. It was never officially confirmed, but it is believed she was the one who identified the body. Reports indicate she was released months after her arrest and currently lives as a free woman with her 4 children somewhere in Sonora. From Miss Sonora to cartel leader, from cartel leader to silent widow. The arc is so extreme it sounds like something out of a TV series, but it isn't. Sonia Barragan and Martha Venus Cáceres, the shadows of the Lord of the Skies. And now we enter entirely different territory, because when we talk about Amado Fuentes, El Señor de los Cielos, the Lord of the Skies, everything is shrouded in mystery, including the women in his life. Sonia Barragan Perez was the only official wife of the leader of the Juarez cartel, the man who ran a fleet of jumbo jets to transport tons of illegal merchandise and whose fortune was once estimated at $25 billion. They married young. They had 3 children, and Amado, unlike other kingpins who thrived on spectacle and excess, was an extraordinarily discreet man. Few photographs, barely any records, almost no public statements. That same discretion extended to his personal life, which makes Sonia's story one of the most difficult to trace in the entire world of organized crime. When Amado died in July 1997 after undergoing facial reconstruction surgery at a hospital in Mexico City, Sonia found herself at the center of a storm. The operation was performed by 3 surgeons. 2 of Amado's bodyguards were present in the operating room. The autopsy report indicated he died from the residual effects of anesthetic agents, but the doubts erupted immediately. His body was transported to an exclusive funeral home under a false name, Antonio Flores Montes. The mustache on the body raised suspicion since it should have been shaved before the surgery. And 4 months later, the 3 doctors who had operated on him were found buried in concrete drums, bearing signs of violent interrogation. The question that still lingers in certain circles is, did Amado actually die? Some voices insist he didn't, that the surgery was successful and the body belonged to a look-alike. The legend was never confirmed but it never died either. And Sonia was left caught between the suspicions of the authorities and the accusations of her own family. Amado's brother, Alberto Carrillo Fuentes, publicly accused her of having passed information to authorities that led to the kingpin's capture. The Attorney General's office opened 4 investigations against her for organized crime, illicit operations, and homicide. But Sonia never went to prison. Her lawyers dismantled each charge one by one. Since 2005, a standing arrest warrant has existed against her for alleged illicit financial operations linked to the sweeping case against the Juarez cartel launched under President Ernesto Zedillo. But a string of legal injunctions has kept her out of custody ever since. Even in 2014, when the arrest of her brother-in-law Alberto Carrillo brought the threat back to her doorstep, she managed to shield herself through the courts. It is said unofficially that she used the political connections her husband had cultivated over his lifetime to stay beyond the reach of justice. And then there is Martha Venus Cáceres, the woman who didn't even know who she was with. According to information provided by the Cuban government to Mexican authorities, Amado maintained a second wife and a daughter in Havana. He visited the island regularly using a false passport under the name Juan Antonio Arriaga Rangel. Martha Venus knew him simply as a wealthy Mexican businessman they called El Patroncito. Amado's lieutenants confirmed that the kingpin paid millions of dollars to the Cuban government to use the island as a personal refuge. Martha Venus lived in a protocol residence in the El Vedado neighborhood, completely unaware that the man she shared her life with was one of the most wanted criminals in the hemisphere. What became of her? No one knows for certain. Amado's death left such a vast void that even his women became ghosts. Sonia navigates between legal injunctions and absolute silence. Martha Venus vanished into the haze of Havana, and the legend that the Lord of the Skies is still out there somewhere with a new face keeps feeding itself to this day. Rosario Niebla Cardoza, the invisible woman of the invisible kingpin. And this is where we close this journey, with the most invisible woman of all, the one who never gave an interview, never posted a photo online, never starred in a documentary, but the one who stood beside the criminal leader who for more than 5 decades achieved what no one else could, never being captured. Until he was. Rosario Niebla Cardoza, known as Chayito, was born in El Dorado, a district of Culiacán, Sinaloa, in 1946. She met Ismael Zambada Garcia when both were children. He was 12 years old and she was a young girl who came to buy meat at the butcher shop owned by Ismael's uncle. According to the family's attorney, Fernando Gaxiola, as recounted by journalist Anabel Fernandez, Zambada fell in love with her at first sight. At 17, he ran off with her, as they say in the Highlands, and they married first in a church ceremony and then in a civil one. They had 5 children, 4 daughters and 1 son, Jesus Vicente Zambada Niebla, El Vicentillo, who would go on to become the logistics coordinator of the Sinaloa Cartel, and was later extradited to the United States, where he cooperated as a protected witness and was a key figure in helping prosecutors build the case against El Chapo Guzman himself. When Vicente was captured in 2009, El Mayo wept. He admitted as much to journalist Julio Scherer in a 2010 interview, saying he wouldn't speak of him anymore. The son he had brought into the business from a young age was now the son who was informing against him from a cell in the United States. And through all that pain, Chayito remained, in the mountains, in silence. The 4 daughters of the marriage also carry their father's mark. Maria Teresa, the eldest, born in 1969, is a professional educator but was caught trying to cross into the United States with $10,000 in undeclared cash. Miriam Patricia, who holds a degree in business administration, was identified by the U.S. Treasury Department as part of the cartel's financial network. Monica del Rosario and Modesta, the youngest, also hold university degrees and also appear on Washington's sanctions lists. All 4 were charged in 2019 with laundering money for their father's organization, though they were later removed from the list. But while her son talked, Chayito stayed quiet. In 2007, the U.S. Treasury Department identified her, along with her 4 daughters, as part of the cartel's financial network. Among the businesses linked to her are the Lecheria Santa Monica Dairy, Establo Puerto Rico, Camaro Construcciones, Multiservicio Heavies, Gasolinera Rosario, and even a childcare center called Estancia Infantil Niño Feliz. She also operated at least 2 airstrips in Culiacán. The business empire that served as a front for laundering El Mayo's proceeds was in large part registered in his wife's name. Dairies, gas stations, construction firms, childcare centers. The most violent business on the continent, disguised as a local economy. In the famous 2010 interview that journalist Julio Scherer conducted with El Mayo, somewhere deep in the Golden Triangle, The kingpin admitted to having a wife and 5 other women. And when asked about Chaito, he made it clear she was still living with him and their daughters in the highlands. He called her the queen of his heart, according to Gaxiola. Though they were no longer formally married, Rosario remained his anchor. And then came July 2024. El Mayo Zambada, the man who had evaded capture for more than half a century, was detained in the United States under circumstances that remain shrouded in controversy. According to his own account, he was abducted and transported against his will into American territory by Joaquin Guzman Lopez, one of Los Chapitos. In August 2025, he pleaded guilty before a federal court in Brooklyn on charges of organized crime and illegal trafficking operations, in a deal with prosecutors to avoid trial and a possible death sentence. His sentencing hearing was rescheduled for April 2026. The man who told Scherer in 2010 that his wife and 5 women lived with him on his ranches, daughters of the mountains just like him, now awaits his fate in an American cell. And Rosario? She remains in Sinaloa. Still alive, at nearly 80 years old, she remains tied to the businesses that for decades served as the front for her husband's empire. She remains invisible. Not a single known public statement, not a recent photograph, not an interview, not a leaked comment. While Emma Coronel posts selfies on Instagram and Eugenia Henao gives talks about her trauma, while Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia makes headlines every time the CJNG is in the news, Chaito stays in absolute silence. The wife of the world's most discreet kingpin learned the lesson better than anyone. In this business, those who talk lose. And she never opened her mouth. Think about it for a moment. Emma Coronel is the most visible. Rosario Niebla is the most invisible. Both were wives of the 2 co-founders of the Sinaloa Cartel, and their fates could not be more different. 7 women, 7 destinies, from influencers in California to ghosts in the Sinaloa highlands. Which one hit you the hardest? Let us know in the comments.